when Lomi Plo and Welk are introduced in the new Jedi Order novel Star by Star. They're given a backstory that makes them part of the Shadow Academy, the initial arc of the Young Jedi Knights books. And not remembering all of the details of the Young Jedi Knights books, I just assumed that they were very minor characters from that series. It wasn't until I started to reread the Dark Nest trilogy that I realized that while Welk is supposedly a student of the Shadow Academy, and while Lomi Plo is a member of the same Night Sister clan as Tenel Ka, they actually don't appear in those young adult novels at all. Troy Denning completely made them up for Star by Star and brought them back for the Dark Nest trilogy. The things you learn on Wikipedia. As with the Joiner King, I didn't remember much of the Unseen Queen either, just that there continued to be bugs and that the situation was getting worse. So, a brief summary. 1 year after the events of the Joiner King, the insectoid Killiks have still not found peace. While Luke Skywalker and Han Solo are left behind on one of the Killik homeworlds to guarantee that the Jedi will find a solution to this problem, JACEN Solo has a vision of the future in which the Killiks cause unending war in the galaxy, and JACEN will do anything to stop that from happening. So if the Joiner King was loads and loads of setup, the Unseen Queen has considerably less setup to deliver, so the book is quite a bit shorter than the previous novel. The Joiner King was over 40 chapters long, and the Unseen Queen is just a little bit more than 20. I did question Denning's choice to jump forward an entire year in the second book, merely because there were some interesting developments here that are just bypassed, skipped aside because of the time jump. For instance, Ben Skywalker is apparently now trying to use the Force again, and his cousin JACEN has gotten him to open up to that possibility. But what we see in the book is just one instance of Ben accompanying JACEN, and we don't see any of that Ben slowly learning to use his powers. It's like, because of that time jump, most of that goes unspoken. Likewise, we don't see a lot of Leia's Jedi training. Over the last year, she's been training with Saba Sabatine to become a Jedi Knight, and while we do get to see their interactions here, it's sort of like saying, oh, this is something that Leia has struggled with, but that's new to us. That's a surprise, because without seeing that past year of her training, we don't know until Denning tells us that that's something she struggles with. Likewise, there is a huge development with Tenel Ka here. I didn't mention this in the first review, but I did find Tenel Ka and JACEN's interactions in The Joiner King surprising, I suppose. I always got the sense from the new Jedi Order books that Tenel Ka had this unrequited thing for JACEN, and JACEN was just too involved with his philosophy stuff and also sort of pursuing Danny Queet, sort of, that got dropped, to really pick up on that. And they haven't seen each other for 5 years, and they see each other and he's just like, hey, and they sleep together? And I'm not opposed to JACEN and Tenel Ka being in a relationship, being interested in each other, but this didn't even feel like a relationship. There was no build up to it, and it just happened, and then he left. And when we pick up in The Unseen Queen, it's a year later, and Tenel Ka has a baby. And again, that 1 year time jump that JACEN isn't even aware that he fathered a child. He's surprisingly cool with it. I don't think that JACEN would have been upset about it, but again, Denning's interpretation of JACEN, especially going forward into the Legacy of the Force books, is rather different than the interpretation I picked up, especially from the end of the new Jedi Order series. I thought that if any of the young Jedi were to pursue that Jedi hermit route, it would have been JACEN, that he, rather than stepping up and taking leadership, which is something that his brother Anakin definitely would have done, and that I could sort of see Jaina doing, that JACEN, because of the esoteric nature of his questionings and his studies, would be more inclined to remove himself from the galaxy. And so, yeah, just Jacen having a child, it's a strange development to me. So the basic plot of The Unseen Queen is as follows. The Killik on Wotuba are facing some weird fuzz problem, and they summon the Jedi. So the Skywalkers and the Solos and Saba, Sabatine come to Wotuba and basically say, we can solve this problem for you, but the former Raynar Thul, now the Unu Thul, is like, you gotta leave people behind as, like, hostages. And they're like, cool. And so Han and Luke stay behind. But Luke staying behind will have ripple effects through the rest of the Jedi Order. While Leia and Saba and Mara go back to Coruscant and try to get figured out what's going on with this Fizz situation, the Chief of State of the Galactic Alliance, Cal Omos, is trying to split the Jedi Order from within. If I've noticed anything in the post-Return of the Jedi Star Wars books, it's that there's a lot of sucky politicians out here. And Cal Omos is one that previously, in the New Jedi Order series, was on the side of the Jedi, someone to support, but he's tearing them apart from within. And because Luke's not there, and he hasn't really set up like a really good second-in-command situation, we've got a lot of Jedi conflict. Meanwhile, the Chiss are agitating against the Killiks again. Jaina and Zekk are still joiners. The Dark Nest, through Alema, they're basically herald their voice, brings up some of Mara Jade's imperial past. Jacen learns about the existence of his daughter, has that vision of the future that the Killiks are going to take over the galaxy, and while he's already doing bad stuff because learning about his baby, he starts doing more bad stuff because of that. And it all culminates when the Killiks attack the Galactic Alliance, and there's a big fight, and there's lightsaber stuff, and Luke faces off against Lomi Plo, but she gets away, and so it's sort of not 100% a cliffhanger, but things are definitely left hanging for book 3. So yeah, let's talk about Jacen. I'd sort of forgotten that Jacen's fall to the dark side didn't start in the first book of Legacy of the Force, that it actually started here in the Dark Nest trilogy. Learning about the existence of his daughter with Tenel Ka and wanting to protect her, he mind wipes his young cousin multiple times and feels no remorse about it. He destroys Ta Chum's mind. Ta Chum, Tenel Ka's grandmother, has always been a schemer willing to kill anyone in her family. But I still feel like that doesn't justify Jacen destroying her mind and making her essentially someone in a vegetative state. And then once he has the vision of the Killiks overrunning everything, he decides that they need to get the Chiss to attack the Killiks to take them out. So gotta bring the Chiss into the conflict even though the Chiss haven't been attacked yet. So he manipulates his sister and the other young Jedi Knights to attack the Chiss. He lies to them, and in the case of Jaina and Zekk, since they're linked now, for better or for worse, they keep pushing back against that, and he keeps messing them with the Force again. So it seems that Jacen is headed on a path like his grandfather, where he will do anything to protect his family. This is one bit where I could definitely see the influence of the prequels here. I'm not sure that Denning would have come up with this plot, the specifics of how Jacen falls, if it hadn't been for what happened in episodes 1, 2, and 3. For me, having just read a lot of those early 2000s prequel novels, this just feels like retread. More so than any of the other plot lines, I did enjoy Luke and Han's time on Wotuba. I just thought that their interactions together were fun. They're in a dire situation, but they don't get super stressed about it. Han is obviously really worried that he's going to turn into a joiner, and as we know, Han hates bugs, but he still keeps a good attitude about things. I did question Luke's, I guess, ease with being kept as a hostage. He seems to have the feeling that he could get out at any time, but it just messes stuff up within the greater Jedi Order, and you would think that Luke, as the Grand Master, the head of the council, would realize the perilous situation he was putting the rest of the Jedi Order in, but he doesn't really do it, and he just goes off, and they don't tell Cal Omas about it. And this really played into some of my annoyance with how Leia was portrayed here, that Leia's very strong-willed, and a lot of times that's what I appreciate about her character, that Leia knows what she wants to do, and she just does it. But how she approached the situation here was, I thought, questionable at times, that she knows Luke has been left behind as a hostage, and Corran, who apparently in the series is the one that's law and order, we need to tell Galactic Alliance what we're doing, we need to work with them. I guess that makes sense because he was Corsac, and then he was part of the New Republic Navy. But anyway, it's like he's taken that role, and Kype Durn's taken the opposite role from him, as usual. They don't get along. And he's like, we need to tell Cal Omas that Luke is being held hostage on Wotuba, and Leia's just like, no. And I did feel a bit like, look, what Cal Omas does manipulating the Jedi Order is 100% not cool, but as, like, the Chief of State, I think he did deserve to know. I understand that they worry that him knowing would just further escalate the situation with the Killiks and the Chiss, but, like, as a former politician, I would have thought that Leia would understand the nuances of this better, but I guess that in choosing to give up the political side and become a Jedi, she's just completely disregarding all of that as well. And I guess, too, I'm just surprised that with Luke gone, the Jedi Order falls into division so easily. We did see in the first book that, like, they're having this problem again, and this has been a common issue with them, that all the way back in the beginning of the new Jedi Order, they don't like listening to instruction, and there's different factions. But it doesn't take very much for some of them to be like, yep, we're gonna side with the Galactic Alliance, and one's like Kype just to be like, no, I'm going off and I'm rescuing people and I'm doing my own thing. Like, you have a Jedi Council. I assume there's 12 members on it. You can't get any sort of control here. He wasn't gone that long. As I said, Jaina and Zekk are still joiners. There's still 2 people, 1 hive mind. And no one seems to have made any attempt to, like, disentangle them from this. But again, that may just be me, who finds the very concept of hive minds creepy, because I would prefer to keep my thoughts to myself. And there's this created drama on the part of the Dark Nest between Luke and Mara, where the Dark Nest alleges that Mara killed this droid programmer who would have been the one to know the codes to get into R2-D2's memory, and that she's concealing things from Luke, and Luke's like, Mara would never do that from me, but then he also doubts it a little bit, but then he's like, no, I would never doubt Mara. And I don't know why that was brought up, other than just to continue the plot thread of R2-D2 having these hidden memories that Luke and Leia want to access about their mother. But also, like, why dig up Mara's past in this way? We know that as the Emperor's hand, she carried out tasks for him, she assassinated people, and she was told one thing, but the Emperor was lying to her, and they were probably rebel sympathizers or things like that. And, like, I feel like she's atoned for her past actions, so to bring it up just for drama in their relationship is like a low blow. With the Galactic Alliance having a blockade against all the Killik worlds, we're introduced to a new military person, and it's this Bothan admiral, and he's never really been involved in any actual battles, but he's done really good on, like, the Thrawn simulations. And when we first met him, I was not crazy about him at all. I'm still not crazy about him, and I suspect he's going to be a recurring character going forward. I guess he was just so hostile to the Jedi from the beginning, and then he changed his mind, but, like, that initial hostility led to me not liking him. And of the bad guys here, we have Raynar again, and initially it seems like he is not aware of the presence of the Dark Nest, and then later becomes obvious that he is subconsciously aware he's being manipulated by them, even if he can't admit that he is. He was like coming in during the fight at the blockade to take over, I think, the Admiral Akbar, because Gavin Darklighter's on the Mon Mothma. But that was really the last we saw of him. I sort of lost track of him in the battle, because we'll go into the issues. I do find sometimes Denning's battle scenes confusing to follow. And Luke actually faces off against Lomi Plo. He sees her briefly, and she seems to be part insect now, which is like, but again, all we know is that she wants to stay hidden, but she also wants to take things over. So, like with Raynar, she will be dealt with in book 3. And then we have Alema going further downhill. I guess the thing with Alema is that she's a survivor, but it seems like each time she encounters our heroes, she gets a little worse off. So when she fought with Luke in the end of the Joiner King, he basically did this crippling blow on her shoulder, which means that one of her arms is now useless. It's still there, but it's all like shriveled and stuff. And then at the end, she faces off against Leia again, and Leia cuts off part of one of her lekus, so like further mutilating her. And even though she's crippled, she's still wearing revealing clothing. So I guess Alema gonna Alema. So one thing I did appreciate compared to the Joiner King was I felt like up until the final battle, there was much less gore in the Unseen Queen than there was in the first book, and I'm not a fan of gore, so I was like, okay, this feels a little less dark, but at least I could read it and not constantly get like creeped out by things that were going on. But now the issues. Issue number 1 is that the Squibs are back. The Squibs first appeared in Tatooine Ghost, and while we don't see them here, they are running a scam, so presumably they will show up in book 3. And look, I know that they are Denning's characters, but I don't care about the Squibs. I want them to go. Issue number 2 is that this definitely felt like the second book in a trilogy, in that I don't want to 100% say until I've read book 3, but I suspect that maybe the Dark Nest trilogy didn't need to be a trilogy. If book 1 was loads of setup, and then book 2 is just setting up a conflict, but we don't really have a battle until the end, and then it's like, come back for book 3. Like, did this need to be 3 books then? Could we have maybe eliminated some of the setup, especially introducing new characters that we've never met before, so that this book in particular didn't feel like such a middle book where it's just, we gotta get through this stuff so we can get to the conclusion, and just wait till book 3. Issue number 3 is, as I mentioned, I don't always like how Denning writes battle scenes because I find them hard to follow, especially if he's cutting from character to character who are in different places. It leads to things like me completely losing track of where Raynar was in all this, or not understanding what's going on when Luke and company attack the Dark Nest ship. Understanding like the basics of it, but some of the details being confused by. So in short, The Unseen Queen is the middle book of the Dark Nest trilogy, and as thus is sort of the necessary connective tissue between the first part and the conclusion. It introduces some big developments like JACEN and Tenel Ka's child. It continues to string us along on the revelation of Luke and Leia's mother. And it sets things up for that final conflict between the Galactic Alliance, the Chiss, the Killik, and the Jedi. But I couldn't help feeling that there wasn't really a lot going on here, and that Luke's decision to be a hostage for the Killiks directly led to the mayhem in the Jedi Order that ensued. 2, the longer that Zekk and Jaina continue to be joiners, the more I am uncomfortable about the situation, and I just really hope that gets solved soon because it's creepy. So next time, I'm going to be concluding the Dark Nest trilogy by Troy Denning with book number 3, The Swarm War.